بچه ها همه خوبن. خیلی متشکرم.
سلام برسونین بهشون.
خیلی ممنون.
Thank you. فیروزه جانم اینجا.
با تنهایی سرکله میزنیم.
تنهایی چرا؟ اینجا پیش ما همه با هم هستیم.
بله. فقط همین زوم به ما.
Shakrullah John, did you say you were here recently in Texas?
تگزاس من اون موقعی که منم کنفرانس اونجا دیگه.
نه.
نه اون موقع.
دیگه بعد از اون نیومدی؟
نه خیلی بعد از اون
نیومدی. فیروزه جان الله پا. فیروزه خانم استردونت هم میبینم. الله پا.
الله پا فیروزه جون.
کیانی خانم؟ فیروزه خانم خواهر شما هستن؟
خواهر پرویزن.
خواهر پرویز هستن. الله پا فیروزه خانم.
نمیشنویمتون. شما میوتین.
دور شده از ما. رفته کجا؟ رفته نیویورک، نیوجرسی زندگی میکنه الان. بله جیم حالش زیاد خوب نیست. بعد یعنی با دخترشون زندگی میکنن که دخترشون کمک میکنه براشون. بله میس کردیم اونا رو همه رو.
خیلی خوشحال شدم دیدمتون و از زیارت آقای بدیعی. من خیلی تعریف شما رو شنیدم. متاسفانه اون موقع که شما تبریز بودین من نبودم، بنابراین ولی تعریفتون خیلی شنیدیم.
خیلی متشکرم. شما خیلی زیادی به پرویز دارین.
مرسی.
من شما رو زیارت نکردم قبلا ولی خوشبختم الان. مرسی.
فیروزه جون چراغ جلو صورتتو روشن کن که صورت خوشگلتو ببینیم همه.
خواهش میکنم. مرسی.
خوبه. الان بهتر شد.
Well, friends, you know there are many non-Persian speaking people in our midst.
I'm sorry, yes.
So maybe we can limit to English.
Okay.
Please, when possible.
Yeah, that's good. I think always we should do that. Yeah.
Allah pa.
Allah pa.
Allah pa. How are you today, Anwar John?
Sabah khair.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Allah pa از میزوری سیتی قدمی هستم.
Allah pa everybody.
Allah pa.
ایران جان الله پا. خوتن. من خوتن دختر احسان.
خوتن جون حالشم الله پا.
خیلی خوشحال.
Well, I didn't know your dad's name was Ehsan. What
yes.
a nice name. Yeah.
Ehsan Shahbazi. Yes. They were cousins.
We're thankful to him that he Ehsaned you to us.
You know Ehsan?
No, they like the name Ehsan. Yeah.
My cousin. Yes.
Allah pa دوستانم. فرشته معینی هستم از امریکا.
Allah pa.
Allah pa. Welcome.
تنجو مامان میاد؟
مامان امروز نه ولی بهشون میگم شما رو دیدم. یه عکس میگیرم، اسکرین شات میگیرم میفرستم براش.
فردا ببینیمتون انشالله.
چشم. Thank you so much.
خوتن جان الله پا.
الله پا عزیزم. How are you? You guys look so cozy. You have water, you have electricity, everything's good.
Oh, no water, but electricity, yes, but no water.
Yeah, we too. We have no water, but still, like camping. It's like camping.
Allah pa azizan.
Allah pa.
Allah pa. جنوس کوچکزاده هستم از هلند.
Allah pa. Welcome.
الله پا از امریکا میزوری سیتی.
دکتر بدیعی. مفید.
میهن قدمی از میزوری سیتی هستم. خوشحالم که در اینجا.
میهن ببخشید میهن چی؟
میهن خازعی قدمی.
So, aloha everybody. This is Faris Badi from Austin, or Buda, actually, suburb of Austin, Texas. I have a question for everyone. All of those who are joining us from all over the world, if we had this conference in person next year, You will be here, right?
Guarantee.
Yes,
Here
yes,
anyway.
I'll be there for sure.
Yes.
I'll be there. You just
Actually,
invite.
Dr. Mirafzali was here last year. Thank you.
From Canada.
From Michigan.
You can invite us. Just invite us. I'll be there.
No one can stop us.
Yes.
We'll invite you as long as we don't have to pay for your airfare.
He would be glad. It would be icing on the cake. But yes, we accept that.
Yeah, well, we'll give you the cake.
Allah Janob Badi.
Allah Hafa Janob Basiri. How are you doing?
Fine, Alhamdulillah. And you?
Alhamdulillah.
Allah Hafa Janob Badi.
Allah Hafa.
Allah Hafa Khotan جان. میشنوی منو؟
Oh, Allah Hafa Fariba Jun. From
Allah
Germany. Hi, sweetheart.
Yes.
Good to
My
see
dear
you.
cousin. خوبی؟
مرسی عزیزم.
دیشبم بودم تا نزدیک 3. دیدم ای تو هستی موندم. بیدار
آخه
موندم.
عزیزم. This is
خیلی
my دختر
عالی.
خاله.
همه چی پرفکت عالی.
قربونت برم.
شوهرت همه خوب؟
جناب جابری میشه لطف کنید برنامه شروع نشده اونایی که بعد کوهوست کنین لطفا.
بله حتما.
خانم کتی وغلی، خوتن جان،
بله.
حبیب.
خواهش میکنم.
الله حافظ خدمت همه عزیزانی. ویدا فیروزی هستم.
Oh, Allah Vida Khanam and Jamshid Jan. Thank you for your contacting us with the concern about the weather and all that. Thank you so much, Vida Khanam. And Jamshid Jan.
Of course, we remember. Thank you. Thank you. Jamshid is not home today. He's at work.
Lapa.
Allah Hafa.
Allah Hafa.
Allah Hafa.
بعدی کس دیگه ای هم هست که من بخوام؟
من کسی دیگه رو نمیبینم الان. فقط 4 نفر هستیم فعلا. Mr. Stockman should join us in a few minutes. He said, I talked to him this morning. He said he'll join us at 10 o'clock. So in about 11 minutes, he should join us.
Okay.
Mr. Badi, what time your conference would be? What season and what month? What month?
It's always February.
Is it always February?
Yes, okay. around Valentine's Day.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So we just opened the conference so you all can come and see your Valentines.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
bring us presents. Valentine's presents.
Okay, and what city would be in Texas? What city?
It is in the city of San Marcos, which is south of Austin. You can fly to either Austin Airport or San Antonio Airport. It's in the middle.
Okay, because I have my brother lives in San Antonio in the base. So,
oh, great.
Yes,
great.
I would come.
Perfect.
In the conference.
It's normally at Embassy Suites Conference Center in San Marcos. That's where it normally is held.
Okay, so
a very appropriate venue.
all the information would be in the invitation, yes?
Yes, it will be.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure. And what is your name, please? Because we
My
see.
name, I come to your the Sunday classes is Fereshte Parvizi Mohini.
Yeah, because your screen name says Galaxy Tab A.
Because it's a new galaxy I got, and I don't know how to change that. And even I don't know how to put the gallery to see all the people. I just see one by one. I'm trying to touch every button and nothing works. So I'm very new on this.
Somebody change your name to Fishte. You're not Fishte. Please, whomever changed Fereshte, put it right.
Fereshte, yeah. Hi, Rose. How are you?
Hi, darling. Fereshte, Jenna is at 2 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
I love you.
Love you.
چرا یا نمیذاری که
اوکی حالا این خواب میشه
میاد اینو میاد
سریا جون های بشرا
بشرا اومدی تو من دارم سعی میکنم عکسم اومده ولی الان این پیکچر رفت
I see you.
You see me?
بشرا موزون هستی؟ بشرا موزون هستی؟
آره الان میرم الان
آره شما موزون هستی؟
بشرا میبینی؟ بشرا؟ نه
بشرا؟
جوونه
شما بشرا موزون نیستی؟
بله بشرا موزون هستن ولی عکسشون رفت دیگه
اگه اومدن لطفا به من معرفیشون کنید من 50 سال ندیدمشون
شما کی هستین؟
من کازین سکن کازین هستیم با هم با بشرا موزون
این خانم موزون همون خانم موزونی هستن که اشعاری میگن؟
نمیدونم
کدام زیاملوک موزون؟
زیاملوک خانم که صعود کردن
بله صعود کردن
شما سروش هستی؟
نه من سریا هستم من دختر خاله سروش هستم دختر بهجت خانم
دختر بهجت خانم به فقط این کرونا اگر خیلی ضرر داشت چقدر مزایا داره که ما فامیلامون از اقصا نقاط دنیا پیدا کردیم
درسته خیلی خوشبخت شدم از زیارتتون
منم همینجور من ایران دخت موفق هستم
حتی المقدور اگه اجازه میدین از اون خواهش کنم به زبان انگلیسی صحبت کنین چون
اوکی
خیلی دوستان غیر ایرانی هستن بین ما
بله چشم
آدم وقتی فامیلای قدیمش رو پیدا میکنه واقعا حیفه که با زبون مادری باشون صحبت
اصلا زبون فارسیش گل میکنه
بشرا خانم you are the family of Mrs. میساقیه الله حالی شما
من بشرا هستم ببخشید تصویرمو بذاریم بیارم ببینم
بشرا جو من ایران دخت موفق هستم I love you good to see you tomorrow see you family gathering
اوکی
don't forget
خیلی خوشحال شدم هر کیه که ببینم از فامیل فعلا 2 نفر رو دیدم خیلی خوشحالم من بشرا موزون هستم
tomorrow see you
آره انشالله
don't forget
بشرا do you see me? I see you بشرا
آره سریا جون میبینمت عزیزم خیلی ممنون که منو آوردی تو این جلسه
سریا خانم سریا خانم من میخواستم سوال کنم که خانم میساقی که فامیل شما هستن ایشون در کجا؟ پروین میساقی نادره و خواهرش نادره که نادره که فوت کرد خاله کوچیک منه خواهرشون پروین تو ایرانن بله محبوبه فوت کرد بله محبوب. مرسی، خوشحال شدم شمارم دیدم. من خازئی، شاید بشناسید، فامیل شوهرم قدمی.
من شما رو میشناسم. I know you.
آره، برای که طبقه بالای خانم میساقی من با برادر
I know.
حالتون میهن اسم کوچیکم میهن خازئی.
میهن خانم. Yes. خیلی ماشه.
منم شما هستن عوض جان.
همشیره کجا؟
همشیرم در چیز زندگی میکنن، کالج استیشن.
کالج استیشن. آها من
اون شما سوزان هنسن میشناسید حتما، آستینم اون میشه دخترش که 4 تا مهرم داره. آره
خیلی
گلرخ میگی گلی.
yes
منم که میهن اسمم که طبقه بالای میساقی مدت ها بودیم با برادر.
I remember that.
من شما اصلا صورتتون عوض نشده ماشاءالله. شما من شناختی درستی میهن؟
No, I didn't.
You didn't first time. Yeah.
After you said you were living in the in my aunt house.
Yes.
Then I realized who you are.
Okay.
خازئی
بله، ایرج برادرم بود. ما دوتا اونجا زندگی میکنیم.
We were living in Canada. Sometimes we saw you. We saw your family in Canada.
Oh, my brothers, they live there. Both brothers.
Unfortunately, one of your brothers passed away.
One of my brother, oldest one, martyr in Tabriz.
Yeah, I know that one. And the other
and
one.
ایرج از سیاوش.
آقای بدی اجازه میدید؟
کانادا.
Okay.
Thank you
yes,
very much.
Please start.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yes, please.
Oh.
دستم دستم بگیر
Thank you very much. Aloha. Good morning, dear friends. We're so happy to see everyone. I hope that you have a view where you can actually see all the dear friends here with us from all over the world. Welcome to the second day of the 23rd Texas Baha'i Bluebonnet Conference, commemorating the centenary of the passing of Abdu'l-Baha. Thank you for joining your Baha'i family from all around the world. We were catching up a little bit earlier, speaking the language of our heart with each other and connecting. And what a gift it has been during COVID that we can see each other, connect with one another, and connect with family that we haven't normally had a chance to do that. We have participants from everywhere. Starting last night, folks from US, Turkey, Germany, Holland, United Kingdom, and other places from around the world. So this is so exciting that we're all here together. As you know, this year, because of COVID, the conference is via Zoom. And what that means is that we had to make a few changes. And as we all know, we can get zoomed out so quickly, sitting in front of the computer on our handheld devices all day long. So the committee had decided to shorten the conference and make certain adjustments. So today we will have 3 sessions that will take place. And we will start at 10 a.m., which we're starting now, of course, with Dr. Robert Stockman. He's going to be speaking about Abdu'l-Baha and the development of Baha'i organization. Then, dear friends, we're going to take a break at noon our time. So you're going to be on our schedule and have lunch with us globally, wherever you are in the world. We'll stop at noon Central Time. We'll pick up again at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time in the US with Dr. Jenna Khadem, who will speak about Abdu'l-Baha, the sheltering branch. How beautiful. And then we will also, tonight at 6 p.m., we will hear from Mr. Bill Fernandez, the example of Abdu'l-Baha. All right, my friends. So the way that it's going to work is that our speakers will speak about 45 minutes or so, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A. And on Zoom Q&A, as you know, we're trying to streamline it so that we can get to as many questions as we can about the topic being discussed. And if you could please, in about 45 minutes into the talk, start putting your questions in chat. We will begin to gather them and see how many of them we can answer. All right, what a treat to have Dr. Robert Stockman here with us. Thank you, Dr. Stockman, for making time to be here. He is, of course, a wonderful scholar, a prolific author, and the director of the Wilmette Institute. There he is. I see his luminous face. Hello there. And Dr. Stockman, I have to introduce you to our friends. You need no introduction from many of us here. I hope you can be patient with me as I read your incredible bio a little bit. As I lose my earpiece, I apologize. Have you seen these technical challenges, Dr. Stockman?
Many times.
Many times. You're so generous. So Dr. Stockman obtained his master's degree and doctorate in religious studies from Harvard University, where he specialized in history of religion in the United States. He is the author, a prolific author of The Baha'i Faith in America, volumes 1 and 2, which cover Baha'i events in the United States from 1892 to 1900, 1901 to 1912, respectively. His book, Thornton Chase, The First American Baha'i, Abdu'l-Baha in America, a volume that reviews Abdu'l-Baha's 8-month journey across North America, and The Baha'i Faith, a guide for the perplexed, love that title, which is an introductory text and part of Bloomsbury's Guide for the Perplexed series. Numerous various articles, books, reviews on Baha'i history and theology published in a number of journals, including Journal of Baha'i Studies, Baha'i Study Review, World Order, Iranian Studies, Nova, Religio, and Religion, and numerous encyclopedia articles on the Baha'i faith, including the Baha'i Encyclopedia. Dr. Stockman, I'm exhausted just reading all your incredible.
It takes too much time to worry about these things.
It's lovely. And then let me just say that we're so excited to have him because he's a great teacher. It's a great lecturer. He has been shepherding the whole process of the Wilmette Institute and helping to develop Baha'i scholars. And it's just really lovely to have him. Most importantly, he lives with his beautiful wife and 2 children in South Bend, Indiana. My parents live in Muncie, Indiana, so I have a particular love for Indiana. Dr. Stockman, welcome. We're so happy you're here. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. You're very kind. I didn't realize you had a connection with Indiana.
Yes.
You actually might have been better off being here this week because I think some parts of Texas may have been colder than Indiana, where it was kind of cold, I have to admit, and we certainly have a lot more snow than you do as well.
Yes, that's true.
I do want to express my concern for all the friends down in Texas for the terrible situation that you've had this week. And I gather it's improving, and I hope that continues quickly and that they're able to make sure this doesn't happen again. But who knows? Who knows? Well, life is complicated. I thank you for mentioning the Wilmette Institute. If I can give it a 10-second plug here, as some of you may have heard, we are now an affiliate of the Graduate Theological Union of Berkeley, California. And this means that we can offer courses for graduate credit through GTU, which is very exciting. And now we're working on making sure that undergraduates can take our courses as well for credit. So we've made a lot of progress where that particular topic is concerned. And it's really very, very exciting to be able to have the faith move into this sort of new phase in its recognition in the academic community. I should share my screen so that people can see my slide program here, and I think this will do it. Can everyone now see Abdu'l-Baha and the development of Baha'i organization? Yes, thank you, Khotan. Khotan or Khotan would be Khotan, I suppose.
That's
not
right.
Khotan.
It's Khotan. That's right. Thanks.
It's not an aleph there. Never quite sure. So what I wanted to do with this presentation is connect Abdu'l-Baha to the next phase in the growth of the faith, which is the guardianship and the rise of the administrative order. Of course, we're now moving very close to the point where just a year from now, we will be at the centenary of the beginning of the guardianship. And we're talking about February of 22, Shoghi Effendi was still in Haifa grieving and meeting with some of the friends from the East and West and talking with them about the future directions of the faith. I think it was in then March or April when he headed to Switzerland for some time in order to prepare himself for his ministry. So we're right at that point, you see. And I think it's useful to realize that Shoghi Effendi was not just simply taking a will and testament that was an abstract thing and building an administrative order, but was actually building on 30 years of work that Abdu'l-Baha had already been doing to construct organization, work that we still don't always understand and appreciate in the West. And certainly at the time when the administrative order began to be created by the Guardian, it was a shock for some Western Baha'is. Not, I would say, for most of them, or for all of them anyway, but certainly for some of them. So moving on down here to my next slide here. One person, as you probably have heard, is Ruth White, who loved Abdu'l-Baha intensely and did not listen to any of his statements about the need for organization. And so when the Will and Testament came along, she was convinced it was a forgery, which of course it was not. The Persian friends were quite familiar with Abdu'l-Baha's handwriting, and it was all, the Will and Testament's written in his hand. It's not written by an amanuensis, but Abdu'l-Baha himself wrote it. So the friends were familiar with his handwriting, but she was convinced that it was a forgery, and of course ended up being declared a covenant breaker. She later, by the way, became a follower of a fellow named Meher Baba. Meher Baba was a mystical sort whose most famous accomplishment was not speaking at all for about 20 years. He would use magnetic letters on a magnetic board to spell things out if he had to tell people something. And I'm not quite sure what the point of having an avatar or a great spiritual teacher for all of humanity who then can't talk to people. It's sort of like the opposite of what we would normally expect as Baha'is. Abdu'l-Baha wrote like 28,000 tablets after all. So he's kind of the opposite. Ruth White was apparently said that she was blessed to have in her lifetime met two avatars, but clearly she was much more focused on the individual than she was on building community. And Abdu'l-Baha was very concerned about building community. And of course, this all began in Iran. And so it's quite interesting to see what was done with the development of organization in Iran, even during the lifetime of Baha'u'llah, but certainly afterwards in the lifetime of Abdu'l-Baha. As you know, the Kitab-i-Aqdas itself calls for the establishment of houses of justice. And I'll have a translation of that text a few slides from now, because the early American Baha'is knew that too. And in 1877, a group of prominent Iranian Baha'is in Tehran, I should add men, but of course I probably don't even have to add that because the women weren't involved in organization at that particular point in the development of the faith, not officially. They were certainly doing an awful lot. And if you want to know the details, look at Mujan Momen's book about the history of the Iranian Baha'i community, Volume 1, The North of Iran. He has 175 pages about the development of the Tehran Baha'i community, which is absolutely fascinating and filled with details and photographs of many of these early believers, some of whom are the great-grandparents of people on this call today, I am sure. Anyway, so a group of prominent Baha'i men decided to start meeting together to handle Baha'i community business informally in 1877. And this continued for 5 years. And they organized a treasury and they talked about plans and did all sorts of things. They did this all in secret, even in secret from the Baha'i community by and large because of issues of persecution. Baha'u'llah wrote at them and encouraged them, sent them tablets, but then in 1882, he asked them to disband on the grounds that their effort was premature. And I suspect when he heard that they had organized themselves in 1877, he probably thought, this is premature, but I better not discourage them yet. Abdu'l-Baha does the same thing as we'll see with Chicago 2 decades later, which is quite interesting. Then in 1887, of course, Baha'u'llah named 4 men as hands of the cause of God, and all of them resided in Tehran. So they were then in the position to coordinate Baha'i activities both in the capital city and in the entire country. In 1894, they inaugurated an informal council by themselves, inviting Borujerdi, who was at that time kind of on the edge of the faith, and they were trying to keep him active and involved in the community in a good way. So they actually made him, I guess, the chair of the body. Mujan Momen talks about all this. And then finally in 1897, Abdu'l-Baha told the hands to organize a consultative body, Mahfel Shor, I guess is how you would pronounce that, an assembly of consultation. And it appears they probably appointed the first members. Eventually, the members were elected by a group of electors that the hands, I think, initially also chose. There were 11 members, including the 4 of them. And initially, the 4 hands each had 2 votes, which meant you had 7 non-hands with 7 votes and 4 hands with a total of 8 votes. So that meant the hands, if they were unanimous, could override a decision of the other 7 if they wanted to. Abdu'l-Baha eventually told them to stop having two votes. So again, there was a transition where Abdu'l-Baha had some trusted people. Baha'u'llah had trusted them to make them hands, of course. Trusted people who could organize things, but now you're beginning to basically create a kind of system of accompaniment where you could establish a consultative body and gradually turn it over more and more to the people who were first chosen and then elected. So you have a situation, very interesting when you consider this as a country, of course, with no democratic elections and such at that time. So you don't have a culture of voting, a culture of community organization like at the same time they had in the United States, as we'll see. So you have a very different cultural situation, and you have a gradual creation of a community culture, which is consultative and which involves choosing people eventually, of course, by secret ballot. We know by 1913 that this Central Spiritual Assembly, as it came to be called, was an elected body. And I suspect we will get more information over time about how all of this happened. And interestingly enough, they also began to publish books in 1898 using jellygraph and some sort of photo offset process. I mention this because one of the first things any denomination in the United States, any religious organization has to do is print books to publish. They usually start with books, and they usually have a magazine. And there's a long history of this in the United States. If a group is too small to do that, they're really hamstrung in terms of growth, in terms of having literature. So establishing a printing system, a publishing operation is a very important step. Furthermore, in 1897, an informal school for boys was established. And interestingly enough, by 1906, an informal school for girls as well. This was being done not by the Central Spiritual Assembly initially, but individuals. In 1900, the Tarbiyat School was established, again, sort of semi-privately, but then the Central Spiritual Assembly in 1906 becomes the coordinating ownership body of the Tarbiyat School. And I'm sure most of the people here have heard of the Tarbiyat School, which was the premier Baha'i educational institution in Iran at a time when, of course, the country did not have a public school system. A public school system didn't come into existence until really the 20s and 30s in Iran, or maybe even later in many places. My mother-in-law went to public school, and she was born, I probably shouldn't say when she was born, but she would have gone in the late 30s, I suppose, to public school and into the 40s. And so there was certainly a public school system where she lived in Tehran at that point. But the Tarbiyat School was very important because this was the time all across Iran when people were beginning to organize small private schools. Often they were Jewish schools, Zoroastrian schools. They're organized by minorities. Sometimes they were Muslim schools as well. And so the Baha'is were all part of this wave of organizing of private schools. And the Tarbiyat School probably was the best private school in Iran up to the time when it was forced to close in 1934 by the government. If the government hadn't cracked down on the Baha'i school system in the 30s, most likely we would have seen the development of a similar situation to the Catholic school systems in the United States, where you had, primary schools, elementary, high schools, and inevitably there would have been the equivalent of a university or a college that would have formed as well. As you know, Catholics have all these different levels in the United States, and the Baha'is were probably evolving in that direction in Iran, but of course with the persecution that was impossible. Tarbiyat School for Girls was added in 1911. The Sehat Hospital was established in 1909. 3 Iranian Baha'is who had received training as physicians overseas. And then Dr. Susan Moody had come from the United States, a woman who had medical training from the United States. And Lillian Capes, who was a nurse from the United States, also came. 2 other American Baha'i women also showed up, sent really by Abdu'l-Baha about this time, 1909 through 1911. And those 4 American Baha'i women were very important for helping to build a health system among the Baha'is. and to help the Baha'is get used to notions of treating women more equally and recognizing the role of education in women. Apparently, they often suffered rather seriously from what I guess we would call male chauvinism, but they persisted, and the Iranian Baha'i men learned, and the system gradually changed. It's really quite an amazing story and really needs to be written up in great detail someday. In 1903, Sadrus Sadur established an institute to train Baha'is who would be teachers of the faith. And so this is the beginning of a Baha'i Institute, a Muassaseh. And this was also an important step because now you're beginning to do systematic adult education, not just deepenings. Faize Khanum created a similar thing in 1908 for women, and Abdu'l-Baha wrote her and has specifically encouraged her to do so. When Sadrus Sadur passed away, I think that was about 1906 or 1907, Abdu'l-Baha asked one of his pupils to take over that particular effort. So these again are organizational efforts, educational organizational efforts that are coordinated by the Central Spiritual Assembly. In 1918, if I have the date right anyway, by then there was the Sherkat Nonohalan. This is an extremely important development. Often it's translated the Children's Company. Nonohalan, I'm told, means something like saplings or something like that. So it doesn't translate into English very directly. And the idea here was that you would basically buy shares in it's like a bank, but it was also more like an investment bank. You would put money into it, kind of like American savings bonds. The Central Spiritual Assembly would have had a committee which would give loans to Baha'i businesses, and they would pay a certain amount of interest, and then you would get dividends. So what you had basically was the establishment of a banking system in a country that did not yet have much of a stable banking system. Of course, we're talking about a country that did not yet have pensions, or did not have social security system, or any of the other modern social safety nets. And so the Baha'i community by 1918 is developing an educational system, is developing a banking system of its own, is developing committees to help the poor and other kinds of committees to raise up the education of women. And I think you can predict the result of this over, say, 2 generations. The Baha'i community very quickly becomes highly literate in a country that was still largely illiterate in the early part of the 20th century. The Baha'i community becomes much more prosperous in a country that was still relatively not prosperous. And this is, I think, one of the most interesting stories about development that one can see around the world. And Abdu'l-Baha, of course, was writing them and encouraging this and giving them direction and telling them sort of what to do, where to focus. So we have a really remarkable story of Abdu'l-Baha organizing an entire national community of Baha'is to lift themselves up, both spiritually and materially. And so there's really quite a remarkable amount of work that was being done to create a coordinated community, an organized community. I list here a few other places where consultative assemblies were formed. The Mashhad, 1905, Qazvin and Tabriz by 1910, Abadeh by 1911. These are all mentioned in Star of the West, and that's where that information comes from. Of course, at this time, only men were being elected to the governing bodies. I think it was 1954 when women were first allowed to be elected. The Guardian allowed it. I think it's 54, but I didn't have a chance to check that date. And the result, of course, as I said, was really quite a remarkable story of organization and development. So all of this is going on, and of course, the American Baha'is knew relatively little about what was going on in Iran at that time, and even to this day, we still are learning this really amazing story of the development of community. In the United States, of course, the Baha'i faith was established starting in 1894 by a Syrian Christian who had become a Baha'i in Egypt in the 1880s, who came to the United States in December of 1892, gradually began to teach the faith, and the first Americans became Baha'is about June of 1894. So you had the beginning of a community, and by 1897, there were hundreds of Baha'is in Chicago, and Baha'i community began to grow in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and in Enterprise, Kansas. 1898, communities began to be created in Ithaca, New York, and New York City. It spread then down the coast to Philadelphia and Washington, D.C., up to Boston. In 1898, you began to get a Baha'i community formed in the Bay Area, in Oakland and San Francisco. So the community grew quite quickly, and by 1900, there were about 1,500 Baha'is living in, if I remember the number, 23 states plus one province of Canada, Ontario. So there was a real movement going on. It was really kind of caught fire, you might say. And a lot of this was being accomplished using a system of lessons. Content that today we would not even be sure we would call Baha'i. It was a little strange by our standards. But in some ways, it's parallel to the Institute process. Not exactly, because it really wasn't consultative. It wasn't facilitated as much as it was a lecturer. But nevertheless, it was a systematic process. A process that ceased to exist in 1900 when the Baha'is discovered that 90% of the content wasn't actually from the writings. And so that was a bit of a problem. And it did, however, bring people in, which was quite encouraging. Here's some information from Kenosha, Wisconsin, because we have a really good record of what happened in Kenosha. God bless them, they kept minutes. And the minute book still exists in Wilmette in the archives. And so we can go through their minute book and we can reconstruct exactly what they were doing. Chicago's a little harder to reconstruct because we don't have all of the 19th century information, unfortunately. So 16 people completed a class in the fall of 1897, and eventually they purchased a seal to put on their papers, which says Assembly of Baha'is of Kenosha, Wisconsin, 1897. We also know Chicago had a seal. The seal doesn't exist, but there's a piece of paper was embossed on it, and it said, First Assembly of Baha'is of America, 1895. So we know about that. They started a treasures book in Kenosha in January of 1898. They began regular Sunday devotions and study in May of that year. And then in 1899, probably in May, they elected officers, a president, a vice president, second vice president, secretary, corresponding secretary, and treasurer and collector. I suppose the collector was responsible for helping the friends make their donations, which were often 50 cents or $1 every week or two. And you'll note that they didn't actually elect a spiritual assembly. When it says assembly here, that meant what we would call a community. So the word assembly meant community in those days, and the community would meet on Sunday, and they would, after their devotions and after their deepening, they would have a brief time for business, and the officers would then carry out the business of the consultation of that community meeting. We know this is true because in the minutes, there would be statements like, the assembly voted to inform the assembly there would be a meeting next Tuesday, which wouldn't make any sense if the word assembly meant a spiritual assembly. If it means community, then the people at the community meeting have gathered to inform everyone else of the meeting, you see. So that's how we can determine what was going on. 4 of the 7 were women. So they were, including women quite a lot. And if you look at a typical small church at this time, you would see that women often were serving as the church secretary. And so there were many of these officer positions that were positions that women would have held anyway. And so the Baha'is were following really an American standard of organization. First vice president, second vice president, that's a very sort of thing that people did with voluntary associations in the US. They also appointed teachers in order to give the lessons. And some of the teachers were women as well. So that's also kind of interesting. Someone's drawing on my screen here. Let me move on down here. Then the Kitab-e Aqdas arrives in 1899. The first Americans go on pilgrimage in, when was that? That was 1898. That's when they actually go on pilgrimage, late 1898. They come back in March and May of 1899. And They brought with them a copy of the Kitab-e-Aqdas in Arabic. Anton Haddad, who was a Lebanese Baha'i, had come to the United States at this time, and he began to translate the Kitab-e-Aqdas into English, and he completed that translation in 1900. I have a photocopy of a typed copy of this Kitab-e-Aqdas, and the copy says translated by by Anton Haddad. Lua Getzinger's copy, copied by who was next? There was two other people, and then the third person whose typescript lived in Los Angeles in I think the 1930s or 40s. So I have a photocopy of a third generation typescript of this Kitab-e-Aqdas. So it was circulating, but only a little bit in the American Baha'i community, not really widely. The Chicago Baha'is had a copy by 1902, but they heard about it earlier, and they heard this text here, and I'm giving you the old translation. It hath been ordained by God that in every city a house of justice should be established, the members of which must be according to the number of Baha, and if the number exceeds this, no matter. The official translation says if it exceeds this, it doth not matter, or something like that. Can't remember, so this is the older translation. And then they had to add probably 9 or 19, because they didn't know what Baha added up to. So that's what they knew. And this began to circulate in the Baha'i community. So they now knew they had to establish a consultative body in each community. So they began to reorganize themselves. When the pilgrims came back, most likely they knew that they were supposed to, they had heard from Abdul Baha, go organize consultative bodies. I think there's good evidence of that as well, though we don't have any examples of the actual written instructions, so we don't know the exact nature of the instructions. But we know that in the fall of 1899, Edward Getzinger, Lua Getzinger's husband, crossed the Hudson River from Manhattan to what is Hudson County, New York. And I have New York there, that should be New Jersey. And he organized a 5-man board of council for that community in northern New Jersey. North Hudson, it was called North Hudson because at that time there were no Baha'is in Bayonne or Jersey City, which is the southern end of the county. Later on, as Baha'is, people became Baha'is or moved to Bayonne and Jersey City, the assembly was for the entire county, and then there were no Baha'is left in the northern part of the county, so the modern spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of Jersey City would be the immediate descending body from this initial body. So in a way, they may be able to make the claim that they're the oldest local spiritual assembly in the United States, fall of 1899. Whether there's unbroken continuity there, I don't know. In December of 1899, the Chicago Baha'is, who had not yet heard the details about the Aqdas, drew up a community constitution. We don't have a copy of it. It doesn't exist anymore. And then again, they chose community officers, one of whom, by the way, was an archivist. Thornton Chase was the archivist. And this was really the beginning of the modern National Baha'i Archives, because the Chicago Baha'is were collecting all this stuff on behalf of the entire community very early on. And all that material ended up in Wilmette. In March of 1900, they elect a 10-man board of council, which is their first real consultative body. And then Thornton Chase writes a letter to his two friends in Cincinnati. Are you and Mr. Thompson acting as a board of council in Cincinnati? So clearly the idea that there should be a board organizing things is now spread around and is understood. In April of 1900, Abdul Karim Tehrani came to Chicago. He actually came to the U.S. Maybe that's the date he arrived in the U.S. and came to Chicago a little later. He arrived to kind of clean up the mess that Ibrahim Corella had made that point. And in New York, he tells the New York Baha'is they should elect a house of judges, which is an interesting way of translating the title. And he even gives them written instructions. When he then comes to Chicago, he gives them a 4-page document of instructions for their board of council. This is after that March 1900 election, and the Chicago Baha'is probably don't quite know how to deal with those instructions in 1900. So it appears that Abdul Karim Tehrani didn't work much with that initial governing body. So in May or June of 1900, the Baha'is re-elect their board. This time they have 19 members and include women, which is an innovation for them. And again, appears that the board doesn't seem to have done much. We don't have any minutes or anything. Racine, Wisconsin writes Chicago and wants to know what they should do, and they immediately elect or create a council board of all, as well, probably all the adults in the community, because it wasn't a very big community. In early 1900, the Baha'is Supply and Publishing Board is organized by 5 Chicago men to start publishing books. And like I said, this is an important hallmark in the development of any religious community. This particular incorporation changes its name later to the Baha'i Publishing Society. The incorporation then moves over to the property of the Baha'i Temple Unity and then the National Spiritual Assembly, and its name then gets changed to the Baha'i Publishing Trust. So the modern Baha'i Publishing Trust was founded in early 1900. So it's quite an old incorporation as well. Finally, in December of 1900, the New York Baha'is elect a 9-member Board of Council. Board of Council, CIL, is really not a grammatically correct thing. Council with an SEL would be better, and eventually everybody switches over to Board of Council, but initially they're using this term Board of Council. And again, because of the wording in the Kitab-i Aqdas, only men were elected to the New York Board of Council. Then Mirza Asadullah comes to Chicago in 1900. He stays for about a year and a half, really gets the Chicago Baha'i community consolidated, helps the people confused about what the faith teaches to understand the faith better. Though admittedly, one of the ways he does this is by interpreting people's dreams and doing things like that the Baha'is really wanted. When Mirza Abul Fazl came to the United States at this time, he didn't interpret people's dreams. He wanted to do much more scholarly things. And some Baha'is loved that, and some people preferred Mirza Abul Fazl's approach. In both cases, lectures that these men gave were published as books very early on, within a year or so that the Baha'is had their lectures in written form. In 1900 and early 1901, Abdu'l-Baha apparently wrote a tablet to Mirza Asadullah saying that the Baha'is of Chicago should elect a House of Justice. Or perhaps he just said they should elect a consultative body, but people knew this term House of Justice. So the Chicago Baha'is got together and they consulted about that. They got a tablet that had been sent to the Tehran Central Assembly, and another tablet Abdu'l-Baha maybe had written them or maybe had written somebody else about the duties of these Mahfali Rohani, these assemblies, these consultative bodies, and they decided to re-elect. They sent out a call for election, which specified that people should vote based on personal conscience, they should vote based on the character of the people, and they should reject the methods and tricks of politicians. So it would appear that they elected their governing body based on no mentioning of names, no campaigning, and no nominating. We know that in 1906, when they re-elected the body, that is precisely what they did. They followed all the system of election we have today of no mentioning of names, no campaigning, no nominating, people praying sometimes for a month ahead of time who they should vote for, and then meeting and having a spiritual meeting of prayers and singing, and then they elected in 1906. So this is quite remarkable that in May of 1901, 15 May 1901, they elected a 9-member board by this system. Later, Abdu'l-Baha, as a result of the a letter they wrote Abdu'l-Baha, said that they should be reelected every 5 years. So that was his guidance to this body. This body voted in their first meeting that they would be the Chicago Baha'i House of Justice. So they took that title, and Abdu'l-Baha wrote them and even referred to them that way and gave them prayers to say at the beginning and at the end of their meetings. These are the prayers in our prayer book today that we say when local spiritual assemblies meet. Those opening and closing prayers were revealed at the Chicago Baha'i House of Justice. And these prayers were so important, Abdu'l-Baha asked Meshkin Ghalam to do them up in calligraphy and he sent the calligraphic versions to the Chicago Assembly as well. So we actually have Meshkin Galam calligraphy of those prayers, and I assume they're in the archives in Wilmette, but I haven't checked into that. Only men were to be elected to this body because of the reference to the body consisting of rajal, of distinguished men. This is the Arabic term that the Akdas uses. So Corinne True wrote Abdu'l-Baha and asked about this, and she received a reply that the wisdom of this in the future would be as clear as the sun in the noonday sky. And this, of course, is the famous passage that refers to the Universal House of Justice. Abdu'l-Baha later clarified that only the Universal House of Justice was this restriction of women, that local and national governing bodies could have women on them. Whether he intended to just start this out with men and then move to including women later is one possible interpretation of what he was trying to do. And then he later modified his advice to reduce it just to the Universal House of Justice. So that's a very interesting development as well. He later, about a year after they elected themselves in 1901, about 1902, he wrote them and said that they should not call themselves a House of Justice, that it's premature. People will think that they're going to interfere with political affairs or that they're a court, and that they should refer to themselves instead as a Mahfel-i Rohani, a spiritual assembly. This is the standard term in English and Persian that we use today. However, there was another tablet that was sent to Mirza Asadullah about this time from Abdu'l-Baha, and it's now lost, so we can't check the original text, but it would appear that there Abdu'l-Baha had used the term Beit-e Rohaniyeh, the house of spirituality. And so House of Spirituality became the standard name for the Chicago Baha'i governing body. And this was especially true because Mahfel-i Rohani was not translated spiritual assembly into English. It was translated spiritual gathering. And of course, you can't name a governing body the spiritual gathering. It sounds too vague. So all of these tablets Abdu'l-Baha then wrote to Chicago, another 6 or 8 of them, which all referred to the Mahfel-i Rohani, were translated into English as House of Spirituality, parenthesis, spiritual gathering, close parenthesis. And it wasn't until 1910 that the Chicago Baha'is finally figured out that Mahfel-i Rohani was the name of a governing body and it meant spiritual assembly. So this caused a lot of confusion because several other Baha'i communities, I think Milwaukee and I think Portland, if I remember right, also received tablets from Abdu'l-Baha, which asked them to form a Mahfel-i Rohani, but they didn't know what it meant. So they took it, in one case it was translated, not board of consultation, but practice consultation. So they thought this meant they had to work together, which of course they did. Many of these communities continued the old Kenosha style organization where the whole community was the town meeting and it had officers that carried out the decisions of the community meeting. And so that continued really right up through 1920, 22 or so when Shoghi Effendi clarified all this. Chicago continued to be called a House of Spirituality right up until 1922. Meanwhile, the women, now that they couldn't serve on the Spiritual Assembly, on the House of Spirituality, immediately organized a women's auxiliary board. And so now you have a consultative body for the women and a consultative body for the men in Chicago. And as you might imagine, this caused some trouble. They probably did not always take that word auxiliary very seriously, even though Abdu'l-Baha said that they should not interfere with the House of Spirituality and should follow the directions of the House of Spirituality. So that was another problem that occurred. It's interesting how these terms reappear. Assembly means community, becomes a governing body. Auxiliary board refers to a group of women, comes to refer to a group of people under the counselors. Our terms reappear sometimes later on. So Racine forms a consultative body also. They call their body a House of Justice as well. Kenosha hears about all this and they decide they're going to form a council board. Note the misspelling of council in November of 1901. They weren't a highly educated community. A lot of them were Scandinavian immigrants or German immigrants working in the factories in Kenosha. So it was a blue-collar community. Then in 1904, they upgraded themselves and organized a temporary men's board. I think the council board was probably men and women, and it eventually became the Kenosha Board of Consultation, which is the forerunner of the Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Kenosha. And in fact, in 1904, there was a young man, 19 years old, named Louis Volz, who was on this temporary men's board, who very soon became the secretary of that temporary men's board. And he served on the Kenosha Spiritual Assembly right up to his death in 1960 something. So you have continuity with one person serving on that body over 50 years. It was reelected annually. Somewhere in here, I forgot to mention Chicago, New York. New York elected its consultative body of 9 men on December the 7th, 1900. In Oakland, California, they seem to have established a conference committee of 9 men and women in 1907. So they're beginning to create a consultative body too. There's fierce opposition to the establishment of these consultative bodies in some communities, because some people felt the Baha'i faith could not be organized, that it was the spirit of the age, that organization would kill the spirit. And so there was a very strong anti-organizational tendency in some communities, not in Kenosha, not in Chicago, some in New York, strong in Washington in particular, strong in the Bay Area. People just simply felt that bureaucracy was the worst thing that they could have, basically. The next major development was a tablet from Abdu'l-Baha in 1906. He wrote the Baha'i Publishing Society in Chicago. At that point, New York had said, we will let Chicago do all our publishing, because Chicago and New York had both been publishing things, and the New Yorkers had too many good writers, all had enough money to publish on their own. So New York never organized anything because all these Baha'is didn't want to work together. Chicago didn't have writers and didn't have wealthy people, but it had printers and typesetters. And they worked together and they became the Baha'i Publishing Society. New York said, we'll send our manuscripts to you. So in 1906, Abdu'l-Baha says, okay, there should be review of manuscripts. The manuscripts should be reviewed by either Chicago or New York. And when Washington forms its own consultative body, the Washington Assembly can also review books. This is because Charles Mason Remy in Washington was writing a lot of stuff. And so Abdu'l-Baha is encouraging Washington to be able to review things too. So the Washington Baha'is say, oh, we better organize so that we have a body. Abdu'l-Baha has asked us to create this body. There's fierce opposition in Washington to this. And finally, in March of 1907, a working committee is elected by the Washington Baha'is, both men and women. Abdu'l-Baha wrote and praised them, but after a year they had to lapse because of opposition. Then they reestablished, then they had to lapse again because of opposition. They didn't want to cause disunity. And so it took a while for Washington to accept this idea. In 1911, it's worth noting that Louis Gregory was elected to the Washington Working Committee. And then in 1912, I'm getting to the Baha'i Temple Unity Executive Board. He was elected to the Baha'i Temple Unity Executive Board, the first African-American elected to any of these majority white Baha'i communities governing bodies. And this, of course, is an important milestone in the development of racial equality in the American Baha'i community. Spokane then forms a 5-member Board of Council in 1908, re-elected twice a year. Most of these bodies are elected annually. Chicago's every 5 years. Spokane is twice a year. You can see how there's no standardization. There's no standardization of names yet. There's no standardization of the number of members yet. Some are 9, some are 5. Abdu'l-Baha was allowing experimentation. Just like, if you may recall, back around the year 2001, when the House, or earlier, 1996, 1997, the House of Justice is calling for the establishment of regional training institutes and the establishment of study circles, but they have not yet said that you should use the Ruhi curriculum. They're saying, use things that are available locally, develop your own materials. It's not until 2005 when the House says that starting in the 5-year plan of Rezvan 2006, the Ruhi curriculum will be the standard curriculum through 2021, and presumably afterwards as well now. So the House was creating this period of experimentation. And I think it was the same way with this development of organization. Abdu'l-Baha was encouraging this experimentation. Thornton Chase moves to Los Angeles in 1909, late 1909, and says we have to form a board, and they form a 5-member board of men and women in January of 1910, and that's the beginning of the Los Angeles LSA. I only have a few more slides, by the way. Then, of course, we turn to national organization. In 1907, Corinne True calls together people from all around the country to talk about building a house of worship in Chicago. The Chicago Baha'is had written Abdu'l-Baha in 1903, saying they wanted to build a temple. Abdu'l-Baha said, Barik Allah, yes, build a temple. And when other Baha'i communities said, well, we'd like to build a temple too, Abdu'l-Baha said, no, support Chicago. So Corinne True, who was really the mother of the temple, began encouraging the other communities, writing letters to them, and she held a conference in 1907 in her house. She had a nice big house where they all met and talked about building a temple. And they purchased the land for the current temple site in 1907 also. I think it was 1907. So that's when they actually had a temple site. They really wanted to have something closer in. The L didn't get to Wilmette yet at that time. It wasn't completed to Wilmette until about 1913. And so there's no way to get to the temple for the people in Chicago. It was very inconvenient. The site was very, very inconvenient at that time. In 1909, they actually held an official convention. The Chicago House of Spirituality called this convention. The Baha'i communities around North America elected delegates or appointed delegates. The delegates came to this convention, and they elected a 9-member executive committee to the Baha'i Temple Unity. You'll notice I spelled the word Baha'i with no apostrophe and no accents, because that's how it was spelled, the name of the body. Interestingly enough, this body, the legal authority, rested in the convention, not in the executive committee. And this, of course, is a major difference from the modern National Convention versus the National Spiritual Assembly. The convention is a consultative body that elects the National Assembly but does not make decisions. But at these times, the Baha'i Temple Unity Convention made the decisions, the executive committee carried them out. So this was a major difference. Abdu'l-Baha, before the election of that body, said that women could serve on all Baha'i institutions, assemblies, scientific committees, educational bodies, the only exception being the Beitul Adle Umumi, the General House of Justice, which refers to the Universal House of Justice. And so at that point, there was no question about electing women to the Baha'i Temple Unity. And of course, they began to say, well, what about the House of Spirituality? And so Abdu'l-Baha begins to encouraging the election of women to these local consultative bodies as well. More about the Baha'i Temple Unity. In 1914, the Baha'i Publishing Society, which was practically ready to go out of business, was turned over to the Baha'i Temple Unity. So they then become a publisher. And of course, the Star of the West magazine, which is being published by the Baha'i Publishing Society, starting in 1910, also becomes an official organ of the Baha'i Temple Unity. So now they're not just building a temple, they're now also publishers. So they're beginning to acquire other national authority and other responsibilities. And then in 1918, when some pilgrims are visiting Abdu'l-Baha in Haifa right after the war ends, he tells them they'll go back and ask the Baha'i Temple Unity Convention to appoint a committee to review literature. So this is the beginning of modern literature review. By the way, the first book they had to review was Isabella Chamberlain's compilation called, what was it called? Oh, darn, I can't remember. It was a compilation of Abdu'l-Baha's writings on unity. And it's now, again, available through Ocean. They rejected it. They turned it down. They said it has too many things that Abdu'l-Baha didn't really say, too many pilgrim's notes. And interestingly enough, it went out of print. So I kind of wish they had never put it in Ocean, because the Literature Review Committee rejected it. But of course, there was no way of sanctioning anybody in those days. There was nothing you could do about it. So Isabella Chamberlain published it anyway. So that's the gradual evolution of the Baha'i Temple Unity convention and the executive committee. And then, of course, the tablets of the divine plan come to the United States. And the Baha'is say we have to be teaching the faith much more systematically than we were teaching it before. We have to really get ourselves organized. And so they say we need committees. And so the Baha'i Temple Unity Convention appoints 5 regional teaching committees, one for Canada and one for each of the 4 major divisions of the United States. And this is the beginning of now what was our teaching committees. So you can see how they really are evolving into a national governing body, doing the kinds of things a national governing body has to do. Other things happening in the teens. In 1911, Abdu'l-Baha wrote the Baha'is of New York and told them to elect women to their spiritual assembly and raise the membership to 27. The New York Baha'i community was riven by disunity. There were different groups and factions, and some groups were being elected to the spiritual assembly and some weren't. So Abdu'l-Baha wanted to increase the number of people on that spiritual assembly so that all the groups in the community were represented. And this was an important effort. They did elect 27, and among the 27, they decided they wanted a 9-member committee to take care of business because 27 was too hard to actually get things done. But that, I guess, was all right. And of course, eventually, Abdu'l-Baha had them go back to 9. In 1912, he had the Chicago governing body disbanded and reelected. It had been elected in 1911, and I think it may have elected women in 1911 as well, but certainly in 1912, when Abdu'l-Baha sent Howard McNutt out to Chicago to tell them to have a new election, women were elected to the Chicago House of Spirituality as well. During World War II, World War I, Chicago, New York, and Kenosha all kind of went inactive. The consultative bodies went through at different times, periods of time when they didn't function very well. And in Chicago in particular, there was a lot of trouble. After the war, when the tablets of the divine plan arrived and when communication with Abdu'l-Baha was restored, because there was virtually no communication with Abdu'l-Baha during World War II, Turkey was on the other side of the war. It was allied with the Germans. And the way it worked was you could not write letters, and the letters would not be delivered across the line, the war lines, either from Haifa to America or from America to Haifa. However, they quickly discovered you could send things out in postcards. So Abdu'l-Baha sent the first tablets of the divine plan to America on postcards, and those went through the military censors. They could look at it, read it, say it's okay, and send it. And so the postcards got through, but otherwise there was no communication between Abdu'l-Baha and the American Baha'is during most of World War I. Then, with this new emphasis on the tablets of the divine plan, Cleveland elects its own House of Spirituality. This is the first new governing body, local governing body, in almost 10 years. And by now, of course, with the Baha'i Temple Unity being strong and the American Baha'is being much more comfortable with organization in most of the major communities, in that sense, they were now ready for the will and testament and the guardian to call upon all places where there were at least 9 Baha'is to elect a local spiritual assembly. So you go and say 1920, maybe there were 6, 7, 8 functioning consultative bodies in the American Baha'i community. By the mid-20s, there are 20 or 30 local spiritual assemblies. And the number just keeps increasing as the Baha'is continue to learn about the system Abdu'l-Baha is calling for and implementing it. There were, of course, lots of problems. Someone told me that the Spiritual Assembly of Hartford, Connecticut in the 1940s had an internal dispute and 5 members voted the other 4 off. So it shows you how people didn't know yet. But nevertheless, it was coming along. And so that's really a wrap up of what I want to say. This is a very interesting process that Abdu'l-Baha organized and led and nurtured. And that process throughout the period of his ministry really led to the possibility of the administrative order once Shoghi Effendi was the guardian. So
Dr.
that's it.
Stockman, thank you so much. What an incredible presentation. It's so much to take in and begin to understand. A couple of questions for you. You explained the hallmark in the development of a religious community, and your academic training as well as Baha'i scholarship really gives you insights about what that process is and how common is what the faith is going through. How does it align with what other religions went through during the same comparable time periods? So like really early Christianity, yes.
Oh, you're talking about like that far back. Oh,
yeah, I'm thinking as you're talking about like, is the Baha'i faith following the same process? Are we doing something?
Ways.
Okay.
In some ways, yes. I mean, if we're talking about, for example, a comparison with early Christianity, there was a period of time when what today we call churches, were experimenting with different systems of organization. The Apostle Paul told people, he basically, let me think about this now. At the time of Paul, we're talking about the 50s and 60s in the Common Era, 20 years after the crucifixion. There really was no organization. Paul recognized the existence of prophets, teachers, and servants in the community. But there was no, at the time of Paul, any effort to create organization. I think Paul uses the term ecclesia. Of course, this is our word for church, ecclesiastical. And the word ecclesia is very interesting. They had to figure out what to call themselves. And there was no real good word in Greek at the time. But Athens, whenever they wanted to have a town meeting, because the whole city, there were a few thousand men who could vote, they would call out, ecclesia, call out the men to meet. And that town meeting was called an ecclesia, a calling out.
Oh, wow.
So this word ecclesia came to mean church amongst the Christians, but it was a political term actually for holding a town meeting, and so that's how it got started. Now the early Christians had two separate forms of organization. The churches that were modeled after synagogues, because synagogues had an organization. Synagogues had a group of elders who were appointed or elected by the membership of the synagogue. And these elders were called elders, presbyteroi, presbyteros is the singular, from which we get the word Presbyterian, and ultimately we get the English word priest. From the Greek word presbyteros. These are elders. These were elders.
Yes. So they were experimenting the same way that we are experimenting. So this whole concept of bureaucracy versus faith that we are also exploring right now, it's very interesting as well. Let's look at what happened in Iran. You were saying the Baha'i community in 1918 was really self-organizing. So there was an educational system, banking system, developing committees to help the poor, committees for education of women. How do you see that happening now in the Baha'i community? There was a statement that was on the Mashghal Askar that was compiled and prepared by the research department in 2017 for the House of Justice, that they were actually drawing our attention to the Mashghal Askar as a center of economic development. How can you speak to that a little bit? And then there is a question about Tarbiyat school. What did that mean in Iran? So go ahead, please.
Well, the question of how to organize the faith and how it should focus its resources goes through phases. So Abdu'l-Baha was not encouraging social and economic projects, development projects in the West. The Iranian Baha'is were in a very different material situation than the American Baha'is. The American Baha'is had freedom of religion, and they lived in a society that was highly organized. There was a banking system. There were laws about creating pensions. There was no social security system. There was a highly developed public educational system. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of private and public universities. And because there was freedom of religion, you weren't persecuted. You could participate in all those things. In Iran, the government-sponsored infrastructure was very limited at that time. Literacy was very limited, and the community was persecuted. So Baha'is would be fleeing to Tehran from their local villages and their cities. And the local Baha'is in Tehran, one of them, I think he was from Esfahan, organized a building with, it was the standard sort of Persian house with your central garden and all these rooms around it. And a family would arrive and say, okay, you guys have that room. And they would have that room. And then he would organize, he had a factory, and sometimes he'd hire them and work in a factory. And as soon as they had enough money, they'd go out and buy themselves, rent themselves a house somewhere. They'd vacate that room and another family would move into that room. So there was a whole system. It was often informal, was not always organized by the spiritual assembly functioning in Tehran to help materially Baha'i refugees coming to the city. Yes. And again, Mujan Momen talks about this. The situation, of course, in Iran changed with the increased development of the government and of government facilities. Once the Central Spiritual Assembly was replaced by local spiritual assemblies and by the National Spiritual Assembly in 1934, the Iranian government cracked down on the Baha'is, and all the Baha'i schools all around the country were forced to close. So that was the end of that particular educational experiment. But of course, that educational experiment was the mother of the New Era School in India, which was established in the 1940s. So you have to remember there's continuity of that experience a decade and a half later in India. And of course, the New Era School was in that sense the mother of all the Baha'i schools that were then established in Africa and Latin America and other parts of the world into the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s for that matter. So we have created in parts of the world quite an elaborate educational structure, or in some ways very simple, but of course that's all you can do. You start with the kids under a tree, and then you get a building, and then you have an informal teacher, and you begin to pay them. And that's all. There's no public school system in those places in some cases. So you have that. The Mashriq al-Askar similarly, the Ashgabad Mashriq al-Askar had all kinds of services. It had a hostel for visitors. It had, I think it had a publishing place. It had a school. So they were able to organize all these auxiliary institutions of the Mashriq al-Askar. And then, of course, the Soviet government cracked down on them, confiscated them, broke up that community, forced 3/4 of the Baha'is to go back to Iran, sent the rest to Siberia, and destroyed the community. But again, there was an effort to build that Mashriq al-Askar up as a center of all kinds of services.
Yes, to organize. That's right. And what about this Tarbiyat school that so many of us hear about, so many here may have attended? Can you speak to that? What was it? What was its effect and importance?
I think it'll be hard to find anybody here in the audience today who attended it. There is a picture. There is a picture of the 1934 class.
Maybe grandparents who attended.
Well, no, let me get there. I mean, there's a picture of the kids in 1934, and in the front row, there's a 4-year-old little Iraj Ayman sitting there with his bow tie. And Dr. Ayman just had his 93rd birthday last week.
Wow.
So he's, I hope he doesn't mind that I mention how old he is. But so he's still alive. He went to the Tarbiyat school. My wife's grandmother had just graduated from it, was about to become a school teacher when it got closed. So she passed away a decade or so ago. So we have we had a remarkable impact. There's a whole 2 books that have now been published about the Baha'i school system in Iran. And the Baha'is at one point, the estimate is 10% of all the kids attending private schools in Iran were attending Baha'i schools. And that was, at the time when there was probably no public schools at all. So we're talking about a huge impact on higher education, public education in the country. A lot of those graduates of the Tarbiyat school then were able to go to the American University of Beirut or farther west to other schools. Think of Heshmatullah Ala'i, who had to go, I think, to the Presbyterian school in Tehran. And they kept telling him, oh, become a Christian. We'll be able to pay for your school education. You'll be able to go west. Of course, he didn't become a Christian. He remained quite a solid, active Baha'i, and he went to Harvard anyway. in the 40s, I think it was.
Yes.
His granddaughter, Patty Day, is a friend of mine. Oh, his daughter, Patty Day, is a friend of mine. So it had a huge impact, Tarbiyat school. And most of the other schools that the Baha'is were able to establish in Iran, their teachers had to go to the Tarbiyat school. Mm-hmm. Initially, the Tarbiyat school had a few Iranian Baha'is who'd been educated in Russia and of course several Americans. We've mentioned those 4 American women and a man named Sidney Sprague came and also helped establish the Tarbiyat school. The American Baha'is were sending all kinds of books and magazines in English there and contributing money. There were scholarships, and the American Baha'is were contributing scholarships for Iranian kids to go to the Tarbiyat school. And at the same time, the Iranian Baha'is were contributing money to build the Mashriq al-Askar in Wilmette. So money was traveling in both
Reciprocated,
directions.
yes,
Yeah,
lovingly.
it's very interesting.
And why did the school close, Dr. Stockman? What the real reason for Tarbiyat school closing?
The Iranian government decided to crack down on the Baha'i schools and forbade them to open on Baha'i holy days. And the Guardian said that Baha'i institutions had to be closed on Baha'i holy days. And so this was the excuse the government had to force the schools to close. The schools would not remain open on Baha'i holy days. That was the guidance of the Guardian. The government probably would have come up with a different excuse anyway. And fortunately, the kids were then able to be frequently relocated to sometimes Jewish and Zoroastrian sponsored schools. Sometimes some of the teachers were able to be hired by these other schools. So there was a rearrangement of things that happened, at least in Tehran.
And so also, what have you seen historically as the impact of Abdu'l-Baha's visit to the West? What has that done for this Baha'i community? Because he organized an entire national community in Iran and he took it under his wing. And then with his own blessed hand, he planted the seed of the American Baha'i community.
Abdu'l-Baha's visit is something that we're still discovering its impact. And there's some fascinating twists and turns to mention. He didn't have a lot of people become Baha'is as a result of his visit, maybe 50 or so. But what did happen is that if you look, for example, at the various biographical records of early American Baha'is, a lot of them would say, you know, I became a Baha'i in 1912, and then you look it up and they were 6 or they were 10. So they met Abdu'l-Baha, and these kids, their identity as a Baha'i was firmly established as a result of meeting the master. And so it raised up an entire generation. It fired up Baha'is to devote themselves to the faith in a way that, you know, very few American Baha'is had the money to go to meet him in the Holy Land. Altogether, only about 100 American Baha'is traveled on pilgrimage during the lifetime of Abdu'l-Baha. But probably 1,000 of the American Baha'is met him as a result of his visit to the United States. So it had a huge impact that way. The other thing it did is that, you know, that of the 3 charters of the faith, you know, one is the Tablet of Carmel by Baha'u'llah. The other 2 are the Tablets of the Divine Plan and the Will and Testament. Abdu'l-Baha's visit was a crucial preparation for both of those. Abdu'l-Baha may not have ever revealed the Tablets of the Divine Plan to the American Baha'is if he hadn't come here, if he hadn't been teaching them about teaching the faith, if he hadn't been consolidating their devotion and love for the faith, if he hadn't been strengthening their determination to spread the faith. His visit was the preparation that made the Tablets of the Divine Plan effective, you see. And as I've just explained about organization, it was his visit that reorganizing these governing bodies, meeting with them, loving them, encouraging them, Chicago, New York, and the National Baha'i Temple Unity. Of course, he attended the Baha'i Temple Unity Convention. This made it possible for the North American Baha'is to become the cradle of the administrative order and to implement the Will and Testament. And that made it possible to implement the Tablets of the Divine Plan. The Guardian did not establish systematic plans for spreading the faith around the world until the 30s, when the institutions were mature enough. So those are huge impacts, long-term impacts.
Yes.
In terms of the non-Baha'i society,
yes,
the biggest impact Abdu'l-Baha had was on the African American community, not Baha'i community, the African Americans in general. Abdu'l-Baha met perhaps half the people Abdu'l-Baha met in Washington, D.C. Were African American. He spoke, of course, at the Central African-American church there. He met the Bethel Literary Society. He attended integrated firesides in the home of a couple. So he met a lot of African Americans there in Chicago. He attended the NAACP 4th convention. He spoke at the Jane Addams's Hull House. And these talks were in Washington, were covered by the Washington Bee, which was the African American newspaper. They were covered by the Chicago Defender in Chicago, and they were covered by The Crisis, which was published by W.E.B. Du Bois, who named Abdu'l-Baha Man of the Month in May of 1912, and covered Abdu'l-Baha's talks in The Crisis. I think it was the June issue. So the African American community nationwide heard about Abdu'l-Baha as a result of The Crisis, especially as a result of the Chicago Defender, which was a Chicago publication, regular newspaper that was read widely throughout the country. And that, of course, this made it possible for Louis Gregory and Louise Gregory to marry. This helped the American Baha'i community to understand racial integration in profound ways they would not have understood otherwise. That was one of the reasons why Elaine Locke was able to become a Baha'i, who was, of course, the dean of the Harlem Renaissance. So Abdu'l-Baha's visit had I would say, a big impact on the African-American community, some impact on the African-American community and on the integration of the American Baha'i community. And this was an extremely important victory.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stockman. Thank you. And I know people are asking for copies of this presentation that I'm sure, Faris John, we're going to get to the people. Thank you for your time, for your wisdom, for sharing your scholarship. My goodness, we learned so much today. And if there are any questions.
Too much.
No, it was not at all. It's really beautifully sequenced. So we can see it's not a straight line. We're constantly learning and experimenting, and it's okay as long as we're connected to the center of the covenant and move forward. We can get there. So thank you so much, Dr. Stockman. We are so grateful. I think everyone is thanking you. And Faris John, I know you have an announcement before we shift over to the musical section.
Thank you, Dr. Stockman. A very informative talk. Really appreciate that. We all learned a lot and enjoyed your talk. And we hope to see you more in the future. Before I move to the announcement, there hasn't been any really questions posted, but there is one comment that I like to mention here. The comment comes from a Persian lady who is familiar with the Farsi language, and Ms. Alice Wahdat, and she has mentioned that in Persian the word for church is kilisa, which is correct. And kilisa, it appears like it has some roots in common with the word ecclesiast.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
But and that's what she wanted to mention. But the word, Dr. Stockman, the word church, the English word church, does that have? Do you know what the roots of that are? How's that?
Yes. Yes, it's very interesting. Let's see if I can remember the Greek. The exact word was kuriakon was the second word. I can't remember. It was from a phrase. Kuriakon means of the Lord. So it was like domos kuriakon, the house of the Lord, or something. I can't remember the first word, but kuriakon is the word that becomes kirk, which becomes church in English. And of course, the French word église comes from ecclesia also. So we have these two roots. They're both Greek words. Yeah.
Thank you. It's wonderful to have such a learned person to have the answer just like that off the top.
That's right. We're getting schooled. This is so beautiful, Dr. Stockman. So many questions are going to come at you. And I'm
afraid I know too many trivial things about words. I love words, and I'm afraid my mind gets filled with all kinds of almost silly little details about that. Then my kids tell me to shut up.
Oh no, you'll be a great partner for all of these games like Baha'i trivia in general. And it's great, Farishan, that we're able to balance everything. Last night we heard from the Secretary of the NSA, I'm sorry, Mr. Henderson, who used to be the Secretary of the NSA, and he was talking about social action. Today you're talking about history. It's all fitting together. So, and then we're going to have some wonderful talks later today as well. So thank you again, Dr. Stockman, for being here and for helping us gain a deeper understanding of the history of the faith. We appreciate that.
Yes, Dr. Stockman, as far as I'm concerned, I could have day-long conversations with you and just keep learning from you. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, friends, I have a very brief announcement. Again, as dear Hotan mentioned, the theme of the conference this year is the centenary of the passing of Abdul Baha. We are commemorating that. And as you all know, the Shrine of Abdul Baha is under construction. Last year, we established a fund for contributing to this construction of the shrine. And even though the conference is free of charge for everybody this year, but for those who like to contribute funds to this construction of the shrine, you are free to do so. And I'm just sharing with you an address here, as you see on the screen. You can make your checks payable to Bluebonnet Conference or Baha'is of San Marcos, Texas, but it's probably better to do Bluebonnet Conference because there is a separate bank account established, which is separate from the general bank account of the LSA of San Marcos, and the funds are separated. So if it is earmarked for the Shrine of Abdul Baha, you can write it on your check and mail it to this address that is on the screen right now. And last year during the conference attendees were able to contribute over $50,000 to the construction of the Shrine of Abdul Baha. Last night I made this announcement and I received a message from one of the attendees, and they said that they thought the fund for the construction of shrine was closed. I don't know that if it is closed or it's not. Even if it is closed, I'm sure there will be expenses in the future for the upkeep and maintenance of the Shrine of Abdul Baha. And when it is earmarked and goes to the World Center, then it's going to be used for that. Other than that, it will be at the will of and the wish of the House of Justice, Universal House of Justice, as to how they want to really spend that money. Anyways, that was the only announcement I have. Again, I want to thank everybody for participation, Dr. Stockman, dear Hotan, and I'm going to turn it back to you, Hotanja.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh my goodness, what a great opportunity for us all to participate in this incredibly historic process of erection of the Shrine of Abdul Baha. As you can see, I have a photo of it behind me of imagination of what it will be when it is completed, and will be under the sheltering protection of the master. I get so emotional, I can't even speak about it. And to have his remains moved to his permanent shrine is going to be something that our generation, we all will be able to witness, and future generations will wish they could have been part of this. So what a blessing for all of us. So thank you for that, Bluebonnet.
Dear Hotan, I don't mean to interrupt, but I forgot to mention one thing, but it's an important point.
Please.
International friends, please do not send us checks. We will not be able to deposit those, because if it is a U.S. Financial institution, then we are okay. Other than that, if you're interested in contributing from countries other than the United States, please contact me. You all have my email, and we can make arrangements for other ways of transferring funds, like electronic transfers and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice John. And maybe we could also put your email's right there on your video. It's right there, farisbadi@gmail. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So friends, we're going to move now to the musical portion of the program. And I'm looking for Simin John. Let's see if she's here. Miss Venus, who is she's going to be moderating the musical portion of it. And we have a treat today with us and for us. So let's see where our dear friend is. And if not, we'll go right straight to, I think Kati is, right? Kati Khanum is our musician.
Aloha, dear friends.
Aloha. Aloha. You're joining us from where? Spain. Oh my goodness.
North of Spain, near Barcelona.
Barcelona, how lovely. It's so great to see you. Thank you for joining us and sharing your gift with us today.
خیلی ممنونم. Sorry for my bad English, so I'm better I speak in Persian.
Okay, بفرمایید. هر چی راحتی.
خیلی ممنون. مرسی از دعوتتون.
Thank you for the invitation.
Dear Cathy and dear Khotan, can you just give me 1 second, please? I just received a message from Simin Venus that somebody needs to let her in.
Oh, okay. Simin Jan is coming. That's great.
Mr. Jawahiri, can you let her in, please?
This is so real. We're on Zoom and everybody has had challenges with Zoom. So this is just keeping it real here.
جناب جاوری, can you please خانم سیمین ونوس رو
با چه اسم تشریف داره؟
Galaxy something.
Here we go. Allah Simin Jan, you are muted, friend. Allah so be shoma bekhair. Oh, I'm going to hand over.
Everybody. I was like a drowning person, trying to come on the surface. So I'm sorry, I forgot to change, friends. I forgot to put my real name on my screen. So the technical people would not let me in because they didn't know who I am. So apologize. I've been here all morning. It's such a wonderful job that I have. It's easy and I love it to introduce these wonderful, gracious friends who are joining us. Of course, you just talked with dear Cathy and she is via Zoom, via Spain, and she lives there with her family for a long time. And she will perform for us and she plays guitar. She sings in multiple languages. And I'm so grateful. This lady is another friend musician who plays music, not as a profession, but as the love that she has. And she always said yes to us. She plays many venues, Baha'I and non-Baha'I. And I'm so happy to have her here today. And she will explain to us about her songs. And of course, she doesn't speak that much of English. She said 80%, which is fantastic. And but if she would like for me to say anything, I can translate for you. You can say it in Farsi. I can translate it for you. But I think you can do it.
Merci. 80% فقط میفهمم نه که حرف میزنم.
Your English, انگلیسی شما مثل اسپانیش من میمونه.
مرسی خیلی ممنون. از لطفتون تشکر کردم که دعوتم کردیم به این جمع بسیار صمیمی و گرم و خوب. خب با چند تا اجرا در خدمتتون هستم. شروع میکنم با یک ترانه ایرانی که این رو بهنام روحانی فرد دوست عزیزمون در ایران سرودن و خوندن و خلاصه ایشون هم میدونن که من خودم بیشتر از ایشون این ترانه رو خوندم همه جا. اسمش هست سحر. ما به دنبال سحر میگردیم. نمیدونم شنیدین یا نه.
بله.
میخواین ترجمه میخواین؟
فکر کنم میفهمن بیشتره. Okay, let me just say for those people who didn't, she's singing a song who has been performed by a friend in Iran, and I think that the group that he is having and performing, the melodies from that group from him and the words are. And this is a friend who's bravely sings and chants, and he's been even imprisoned because of what he's doing. And he has a most beautiful voice, but he keeps doing what he's good at it, and that's composing and singing. And Kathy will sing one of his songs. Go ahead, Kathy.
ما به دنبال سحر می‌گردیم، ما به دنبال سحر می‌گردیم، دست در دست نسیم، دلمان غرق بهار. ما به دنبال سحر می‌گردیم، هر کجا نوری هست باید آنجا را گشت. شاید آن چشمه نور روزنی باشد از این آخر شب، رو به سحرگاهی نو. ما به دنبال سحر می‌گردیم، ما به دنبال سحر می‌گردیم، ما به دنبال سحر می‌گردیم، دست در دست نسیم، دلمان غرق بهار. ما به دنبال سحر می‌گردیم، شاید آن عاشق پیر به سرودی می‌خواند، قاصدی هست که پیغام جدیدی دارد. ما به دنبال سحر می‌گردیم، ما به دنبال سحر می‌گردیم، ما به دنبال سحر می‌گردیم. مرسی، خیلی ممنون. ترانه بعدی ما در اسپانیا یک سری از دوستان از قوم کلی داریم که ایمان آوردن، بیشتر در جنوب اسپانیا هستن و اینا ترانه‌های خیلی قشنگی دارن، خیلی شاد و قشنگ، همونطور که خودشون خلق و خوشون اینطور هست. حتی جلسه‌هایی که میگیرن بیشتر آواز و اینا هست و رقص و شادی هست توش. و این یکی از ترانه‌های اونا هست که البته راجع به آثار صحبت میکنه، ولی حالا یه قسمتیشو میگم، یکی از من یک جملهشو میگم.
There is a group of people in Spain, Gitanos, or the Gypsies they call, and who have become Baha'is, and when they get together, they sing, and then they play music, and even their prayers and their worships and like that. So she's singing one of their songs.
میگه خیلی ساده هست بفهمیم و خیلی زیبا هست به یاد بیاریم.
It says it's very easy to understand and it's very easy to remember.
که اگر سعی بکنیم با او باشیم زندگیمون نور بیشتری خواهد داشت.
And that if we try to be with him, meaning the Almighty, and we will have a better life.
منظور جمال مبارک هست.
Meaning the blessed beauty.
Rompe tu jaula y como el fénix del amor ves remontando hasta llegar al firmamento que te guarda y conocer la santidad del bien amado. libérate de las cadenas de este mundo, suelta tu alma de la prisión del yo que te domina y toma tu oportunidad de hallar tu alma. Es tan sencillo de comprender y tan hermoso de recordar que si lo intentas y estás con él, tendrás la paz en tu corazón. Es tan sencillo de comprender y tan hermoso de recordar que si lo intentas y estás con él, tendrás la vida con Baha'u'llah. La mala hierba no la plantéis en el jardín del corazón y júntate con el que es justo de por vida para que crezca en ti las rosas del amor. Con su palabra y la fragancia de sus labios te amará. Solo procura no apartarte de su lado y solo así te sentirás en libertad. Es tan sencillo de comprender y tan hermoso de recordar que si lo intentas y estás con él, tendrás la paz en tu corazón. Es tan sencillo de comprender y tan hermoso de recordar que si lo intentas y estás con él, tendrás la vida con Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah, 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 خب این هم ترانه جیپسی های ما هستن که یک شباهتی هم با ترانه های ایرانی دارن خودمونیم.
There's some familiar music with the Persian music that the gypsies have.
بازم قراره بخونم.
I thought you have 3.
اگه دوست داشته باشین یه ترانه ایرانی دیگه بخونم اگه وقت باشه.
Go ahead. Yes, it is. بفرمایید.
چجوری میگیم بله به اسپانیش؟
میشنوم. همه میگم بله تو خونه هاشون.
او بله بله.
Sí, por favor.
Sí, por favor.
Sí, por favor. حتما. اینم یه ترانه کلاسیک ایرانی، حالا من به فرم خودم میخونم، من اونقدر کلاسیک نمیخونم.
It's a classical music, Persian classical music, but she has changed and give it a new try.
راجب ایران. راجب
It's about Iran.
من که فرزند این سرزمینم، در پی توشه خوشه چینم، شدم از پیشه خوشه چینی، رمز شادی بخوان از جبینم. قلب ما بود مملو از شادی بی پایان، سعی ما بود بهر آبادی این سامان. خوش چین کجا اشک مهنت به دامن ریزد، خوش چین کجا دست حسرت زند بر دامان. ای خوشا پس از لحظی چند آرمیدن، همراه دلبران خوشه چیدن، از شف گهی همچو بلبل نغمه خواندن، گه از این سو به آن سو دویدن. برپا بود جشن انگور ای افسونگر نغمه پرداز، در کشور سبز و گل با شور و شف نغمه کن ساز. برپا بود جشن انگور ای افسونگر نغمه پرداز، در کشور سبز و گل با شور و شف نغمه باز. قلب ما بود مملو از شادی بی پایان، سعی ما بود بهر آبادی این سامان. خوش چین کجا اشک مهنت به دامن ریزد، خوش چین کجا دست حسرت زند بر دامان. خیلی ممنون، مرسی.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you very much.
Dear friends, this is the end of our music session, and I received a message that says, "I wish you were speaking better English." So I apologize if I don't. Yes, Azizam.
Excuse me. Actually, we have one more section that a gentleman by the name Mr. James Mumtazi is available for one song. We have a few minutes. We don't know much about him, so I cannot introduce him properly, and I'm sorry about that because the offer just came in today. So if Mr. Jabari knows more about him, please introduce him. Other than that, let's just give him a few minutes for one performance, and then we can wrap up the program. Is that okay with everybody?
Sounds good. Absolutely.
Yeah, I sent you a private message, Simija. Maybe you didn't see it yet.
Wonderful. Well, we're waiting.
Actually, I just saw it. I apologize. I just saw that. And so my apology to Mr. Mumtazi.
So while we're waiting, Farishjan, there was a question in chat that you responded, if you wouldn't mind responding one more time about the Bluebonnet conference earmarked for the Shrine of Abdul Baha.
Right. I did post a general comment in the chat for everybody. If you do wish to make contributions for the Shrine of Abdul Baha, please, if you're from the United States or you have a banking relationship with the United States financial institution, you can write a check, post it, and I actually posted in the chat also. Make the check payable to Bluebonnet Conference and earmark it for Shrine of Abdul Baha. So it gets specifically for that purpose. And you don't have to say construction of the Shrine of Abdul Baha, just mention Shrine of Abdul Baha so the World Center can use it for future maintenance and upkeep and so forth also. If you say construction, then if the construction is completed, then what do they do about it?
Wonderful.
Would that do, Khotanjan? Is that enough?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you so much for clarifying. I think our dear friend is here, ready to perform.
آقای بدی فکر کنم که خودشون بهتر از من بتونن خودشون معرفی کنن هم به فارسی هم به انگلیسی.
علاوه خدمت تمام عزیزان هر جای دنیا که هستید، من جمشید ممتاز هستم از شیراز و خب ساکن ویرجینیای آمریکا. به هر حال من شغل اصلی عکاس و فیلمبرداره، ولی خب بالاخره این روزا به دلیل کرونا و به قول معروف خلاصه یکم هم به هر حال برای تفریح و تنوع یه مقدار میخونم و ساز میزنم، ولی خب حالا افتخاری بود که اگر اجازه بدید بالاخره یک آهنگ شاد از عارف برای فقط تنوع افتخاری باشه که بخونم براتون.
جناب ممتازی خیلی متشکریم، ولی اجازه بدین ناظم جلسه بیانات شما رو به انگلیسی ترجمه کنن برای بقیه.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you so much. Yeah, sure.
Into English.
Yeah, I'm from...
Botan John, can you translate it? Oh, you can do it yourself, please.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Please go ahead.
I am from Iran, Shiraz, but I live in Virginia, USA, and I'm so happy to be here. And I would love to just make a little bit, different time for everybody to. I'm sorry, I have to sing by Persian. I don't know English, but
oh, it's good. No problem.
Forgive me, and then I wish to everybody be happy and fun.
And so you are from Shiraz, where you were born and raised in Shiraz?
Yes, I was born in Shiraz.
So you bring us the beautiful spirit of Shiraz with you. Thank you very much. Via Virginia. That's right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please go ahead. Thank you so much.
Sorry about that. I wish whoever can dance, do it, please. کی بهتر از تو که بهترینی، تو ماه زیبای روی زمینی، تو قلب من باش تا که بفهمی چه دلبرانه به دل میشی. حتی بدیهات بخشیدنی بود، شرم تو چشمات بوسیدنی بود، همه حواست جا مونده پیشم، من به کم از تو راضی نمیشم. تو جای من باش تا باورت شه، دیوونه عشق تو هستی یا من. تو چشم من باش تا که ببینی که چشمای تو چه کرده با من. بدرقه کردم تنهاییامو، کسی شنیده شاید بابو. کجا من و این روی ماه شما، کجا لبای بوسه خواه تو. کی بهتر از تو که بهترینی، تو ماه زیبای روی زمینی، تو قلب من باش تا که بفهمی چه دلبرانه به دل میشینی. حتی بدیهات بخشیدنی بود، شرم تو چشمات بوسیدنی بود، همه حواست جا مونده پیشم، من به کم از تو راضی نمیشم. به هر حال I don't want to take more time. It's a little bit repeated, but thank you so much to give me the time to share with you guys a little bit happiness.
Thank you so much for bringing happiness to everyone's hearts. Heaven knows we need happiness. خدا میدونه چقدر احتیاج داریم.
Everybody, yes, exactly.
Yes. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you for that, to let me to just take your time. Thank you so much. I love everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing your gifts with us. Dear friends, we are at the end of our program for the morning. We will get back together this afternoon. It will be opened up again so we can all come together at 1:30 Central Standard Time to share some connection with one another informally before we go live at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time sharp. Dr. Jana Khadem will be speaking about Abdu'l-Baha, the sheltering branch. How beautiful is that? We'll see you all in the afternoon. Have a great afternoon our time. Have a great time where you are. And thank you very much for joining us. This is such an honor to be together. Thank you. We'll see you soon. Allah Apa.
How long was the meeting in this morning? از کی شروع شد؟ 8 صبح؟
John, نه امروز صبح از 10. It started at 10 a.m. and it ended at noon. These are 2-hour sessions. And then the next one will be from 2 to 4. So another 2-hour session. Yeah.
It means then, now it's 12 o'clock
at night.
Time.
2 صبح باید تشریف بیارین. Oh my God. خیلی زیاد میشه.
نه الان برای ما خیلی خوبه. من لس آنجلس هستم. الان ساعت 10.
10 شماست. بله. پس میشه 12 شما اگه دوباره تشریف بیارین.
میرم واسه شما که دیر میشه.
برای ما دیگه ساعت 2. It's at 2 o'clock.
پس 2 ساعت دیگه باید برگردیم.
2 ساعت دیگه برمیگردیم. 2 more hours.
من از 8 صبح دارم کمکم میکنن که بتونم زومو بگیرم.
خب همینجا روشن بذاریم.
بله. شما اسمتون چیه عزیزم؟
من خوتن شهبازی هارمن.
از اسپانیا؟
نه من کاشکه من مال آستین تگزاسم.
پس شما آمریکایی با مثل خودمونید پس.
من کم سواد ایرانی ام، بی سواد نیستم. بچه بودم اومدم اینجا. آخه مرسی. Thank you everyone. See you all in 2 hours.
Can I ask you a question before you go? I might have missed if you've announced it, but is there a way that we could see this video of the talk and the program again, and where? How can I get to it?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. It is being recorded, as you can see on the top left side of Zoom. It says recording and then live streaming. So there is going to be a link that will be shared hopefully we'll be able to share it at the next session. Okay. If not at the end of the day. So Jinus Khanum, thank you for asking. We will make sure Mr. Badi will have it available.
Thank you so much. Excellent program. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Alapa, how are you?
Alapa, how are you?
I'm so glad to see you. Actually, you're finished or you're going to start it?
I'm sorry, I did not hear you.
Are you going to start it or you're going to finish?
This is the end of this section. And so everyone is, you're welcome to leave it on, but you will be in the waiting room and then it'll help you come back in about an hour and a half. And then there'll be
about 30 minutes later?
It will be an hour and a half later that we will open it back up for folks to come together and to be able to